So I'm joined by the guys here from Butane, Micah and Jay. We're going to go through a whole bunch of different things. First off, about Butane, so we can learn a little bit more about it and what to expect from the project over the next couple of months. But then also have a little bit of a conversation around oracles and some of the open source development that these guys are doing with, what's the protocol called again? Blaze?
Blaze, yeah.
Blaze, awesome. So we're going to learn quite a lot here in this conversation. So guys, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Thanks.
Okay, let's get into Butane and what are you guys actually building? It's some synthetic thing. Can you explain what this all is?
So I guess to get started, what synthetics are, I think the simplest definition we always give is that synthetics are effectively tokenized derivative assets. So you have some base asset, the usual example is like USD, and then we have some token that acts as a derivative on that. And the idea is to track the price of it and approach some kind of soft peg. And so the way we do that is people can mint synthetic assets on Butane by opening what's called collateralized debt positions, or CDPs. Yep. And that involves people depositing some collateral value. It doesn't have to just be ADA, it can be a bunch of different tokens. And the tokens you can use as collateral is different for each synthetic. But they deposit collateral, mint some synthetics, and that opens a kind of effectively like a loan position. Yeah. And then that's maintained to be over-collateralized, so every synthetic is backed by sufficient collateral value, and then they can use that on different dexes or other platforms as if effectively with the same price as it is in the real world, effectively. Yeah. So that's the idea behind synthetics.
Yeah. I kind of think of it like you're borrowing from a source of you're borrowing new tokens that you mint while you borrow them, and the system can sustain that as long as there is enough buying pressure, and you kind of you can model it very closely to loans. It's just you need to have this little minting action at the same time, and it's a bit more complex.
Yeah. So like loans, if there are any unhealthy positions, they're subject to be liquidated. Yeah. And then we have redemptions as well, which is might get into that a bit later, but it's an idea of how these loans can have their collateral redeemed in the event that the supply...
And that's the hard peg mechanism?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So a bunch of different pegging mechanisms.
So the main benefit, well, one of the benefits is that it allows people to get exposure to a different asset that doesn't exist on Cardano at the moment.
Yes.
Stable coins, Bitcoin, ETH, whatever it is, they can create that synthetic version of it and get some of the price action, which may not happen in the Cardano ecosystem if they're just holding ADA. So that's an absolutely brilliant use case of it. Now, you mentioned redemption, so people can use the ADA to create these synthetic assets, but then also use the platform to get and create more revenue from it through redemptions. Is that correct?
Redemptions are a mechanism to unlock the value of your synthetic by accessing value from both the treasury, or if you need to, we have a way to close positions that it's designed to prevent depegging situations, so that your stablecoin or your USD pegged synthetic asset is always tracking within a peg range, and that doesn't just nosedive. So because you can have scenarios where people want to leverage, and that's to an extent greater than the market actually wants because there's not enough buy side, and so you need to close that down a little in order to keep people with their money. Like, you want to make sure they can always access the dollar behind the dollar.
This gets very confusing for a lot of people out there. Synthetics is probably one of those things. I know we had little conversations before within our groups here, people trying to understand synthetics, and it's just like a mind-boggling concept to them because there are so many different layers that you can go through to actually use and operate on the platform itself. Are there like interesting or easy ways that you guys have created to make the platforms more understandable for people?
We really want to focus on the educational side as a priority. I think today we've heard so much that everyone in Catalyst really cares about education, and that's a massive sticking point for Cardano. So that is something we're working on with our branding. We have a top-down approach where we try and get the nitty-gritty in the white paper, the yellow paper out really solidly, and we want to use that to cooperate with technical educators and create more digestible content for the everyday Joe, so that you can really understand what's going on without having a advanced technical background.
Yeah, I think another thing is, like, as we're talking about like things like redemptions and other features, a lot of these are just kind of almost like safety features and backstops. So the average user really doesn't even need to get involved with. It's just to give kind of assurances to the community of our like kind of commitment to safety and optimizations on the platform. So the average user, they might not even interact with Butane, the protocol itself. They might just buy and sell synthetics, because you don't have to mint them to interact with them.
Yeah.
You might just buy a USD synthetic, we're going to call USDB. You'll buy and sell it on a DEX, and if the system functions as intended, it'll be approach a $1 price peg.
And what he means when he says backstop is redemptions are the hard mechanism. If the soft mechanisms work well, then you actually might never need to invoke that. It's just to give a greater assurance.
Really interesting. Now, what's your competition like at the moment? Not just in the Cardano space, but like other synthetic platforms. How are you comparable to what's already existing in the whole DeFi space?
I think we've got a new combination of features which I don't see around that often, because we have two forms of supporting multi-collateral. So in one position, you can have multiple assets, and that is useful for hedging strategies where you want to prevent the volatility in a single asset from affecting your ability to collateralize your debt, which helps you maintain a health factor, which, you know, that's part of your financial strategy to prevent your liquidation and pay fees there. We also have partial liquidations, and we also, I think, there's a lot of advantages just to developing in Cardano in the first place, because Cardano has all these security improvements over other chains, and having a really solid product on this chain is an advantage in itself.
I think with Cardano especially, there's just inherent features and kind of possibilities that we really can't do on other chains. So an example we often bring up
liquid
is
staking. Every single collateral position that you have, if you have ADA in it, you keep your staking rights. And that's really, on Cardano, it's the best. So
I can still get my staking rewards and vote and Catalyst. And,
you retain the staking rights of the ADA in your CDPs.
Wow, okay, that's so flexible.
It's very nice, But actually, I was going to mention is the example we often give is that we let people kind of do multiple quote unquote actions in a single transaction. And so an example we often give is it's almost something like if you have an unhealthy CDP, you can do almost what's like a leveraged buyout, which is when you can actually liquidate a CDP, which means you're repaying the debt, someone else's debt, and claiming not necessarily all of their collateral, but a significant amount of their collateral. But what you can do is in the same transaction that you're liquidating a CDP, you can create another one, which means you're minting the synthetics that you're using to repay someone else's loan. And you can only do that in a system that Cardano permits.
Has atomicity in the transactions.
It's atomic, it's composable, it's interoperable, and completely deterministic and safe. So we think it's a really cool feature.
I think where people saw this was when we showed our testnet for the first time in video form. We had this action cart that you could see what you were building up to do, and then you hit complete, and it all happens at once. That is very Cardano specific, and it's part of the EUTXO architecture. And we're very happy to be able to use that, because it allows you to do all these cool things where you minimize execution risk, and we think that's very advantageous.
I absolutely love that feature. When I was playing around with the testnet, just building up my transaction and seeing how large it is, I can squeeze in a little bit more here, and then execute it afterwards. I think that was an absolutely brilliant feature, and really shows the efficiency that you can get on Cardano, which is absolutely amazing. So it's really good that you guys did that kind of thing. I think it will influence other dApps to try and build that kind of efficiency as well.
Where it really gets cool is if we have cross-dApp integrations where you can do these atomic actions and at the same time go into other apps. So we did an integration with SundaySwap where when you create the CDP, you can immediately create an order in the same transaction to sell and that's what I think Jay was talking about. We can do that across the board with so many different protocols. We just need to really coordinate and work with them and see who can support what we want to do.
That's crazy. The other thing you mentioned a little bit earlier was also hedging your assets by being able to collateralize with multiple different assets into a CDP. I think that's also really crucial because not everyone's going to be watching all the price movements or all these assets, and being able to hedge your CDP with multiple different assets so you don't get liquidated when something gets rugged, for example, I think is really, really important. Now, I want to know is how do you decide which assets we can use as CDPs for creating a brand new asset?
So for the initial configuration, we're deciding that as a team, and we're considering factors like liquidity, risk of the token, you know, pretty much how easy it is to turn that token into ADA, and how secure is that. So that's our analysis. We're reading some other analyses. We aren't like delegating to them entirely. We read the Cerberus reports to see what they think. But then eventually, once we have governance live, it's going to be a voting mechanism where we're going to give advice and like say, hey, this is what we think, but the community can always go against that and bring in tokens that they would like to see in the system.
I think another thing is each collateral asset for each synthetic is individually kind of configurable with parameters. So what I mean by that is if there's a token that is deemed, I guess, by the community or by whoever's, you know, how the synthetics parameters are decided, if a collateral token is deemed to be, you know, highly liquid, relatively unvolatile, we can give it a high kind of borrowing power in effect on the platform. Which means if you have a position that's mostly collateralized by that, you don't need to over-collateralize your position as much as if you were to use a more volatile, less liquid token, which could have a more like dangerous effect on the system if it were to have high price action. So we can adjust as the, you know, we can adjust like the protocol's tolerance to different tokens individually.
And also we can, not just on a per collateral token, it's per collateral for every synthetic class. So we can have a token like USD, which has much stricter risk assessment, and then we can also have a cryptocurrency synthetic which might have a looser one because you want to enable more CNTs to go into there. And having the, as Jay said, having the parameters in the first place really means we can reduce risk by, for these volatile coins, you just increase the ratio they need. So.
Very cool. Awesome feature there. Is there anything else that really stands out with Butane that the audience needs to know about?
We think it's fast. We think it's secure. We'd like you to try it out once it's on mainnet.
It'll be open source.
You can just do so many things. Yeah, it will be open source. You can do so many things because it's very interoperable. So I think it's the building blocks that you need to achieve a lot in DeFi, and having it out there will enable so many layers of applications to build on top of it. And that's a big selling point for me, like what I like about it.
Okay, really cool stuff. Now, you guys recently had your token launch. You had the, what was it on MinSwap?
No, we did our own platform.
Yeah, own platform. Okay, you had your token sale.
That's open source already.
That's fantastic. So people can pick that up and do their own token.
Yeah, Splash's token launch actually used our code.
That's fantastic. So, that's amazing. How much did you guys raise from that?
We got 9.75 million ADA, but then the contribution amount that people participated in was 50. It was like ridiculously high.
Okay, around 50 million, because it was a pro rata sale, so any excess was refunded pro rata. I think it ended up being just over 80% of each deposit was refunded.
Message we should have made it more expensive.
But congratulations on that sale. That was wildly successful. I remember watching it. It was like, oh my god.
It was awesome. It was beyond our wildest. Like, really, we were like anticipating like maybe it goes twice over. We were like, oh, are we even going to make the cut? It was very like we were thinking about it for so long, and then seeing like, oh, first hour, and then over and over. Yeah.
Because for us it was 2 a.m. I really struggled to not wake my house up.
We had to live during the sale. We were actually making changes to show more bars, so that people would, because we didn't expect.
We had a bar that was filling up with how close the contribution got. We realized, oh no, we have to keep adding more, which was a lot of fun. But yeah.
Oh my god. Okay. Now, you guys have also now listed on a centralized exchange as well. So liquidities, MXC, yep, MXC, however you say that. It's one of those weird things. You did have a little bit of a hiccup from the liquidity moving on there. I wasn't online to see all this or really understand what happened. Can we get an explanation of what actually happened and what you guys did for the community afterwards?
I think you mean the Lenfi situation?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Not the Mexi. Lenfi. So the situation was with Lenfi was that we decided to move liquidity. The original plan was to distribute it across a few different dexes, but what we ended up doing, because of just like the fact that you can't create pools at the moment on Spectrum and we were waiting for Splash to launch, we just decided we're going to move it all in the end. But the original plan was to split it. We did that, and then what we realized the next day when I woke up was that Lenfi didn't support Sunday on their Oracle platform. And so making that change without checking and without knowing, we'd done some checks. We had talked with Dex Hunter and we'd made sure that they support Sunday before we did, because we wanted to make sure none of the aggregated orders got screwed. But we failed to check with Lenfi. Lenfi failed to support Sunday. We didn't have involvement in the Oracle design for Lenfi, so we didn't have any knowledge of that. But ultimately, we think that having like a 50-50 share of the blame was fair, and we bought about 200,000 BTN off market to contribute to making users whole and making sure no one,
upset about the whole situation. Well, that was probably a really brilliant move on you guys to keep the community on side and really happy. So again, hats off to you guys for making that decision. Yeah, I thought it was moving liquidity from your platform or wherever it was originally to MXC. That's what I thought. Okay.
It was to Lenfi. No, it was not to Lenfi. It was to Sunday, and Lenfi was affected.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So this leads me to my other conversation about oracles and what you guys are doing in this space now with that. It sounds pretty interesting. It sounds like you teamed up with Sunday Labs to do all this. What's going on?
So we had an initial idea, and we had a prototype in TypeScript, and then we gave it to Sunday, and we said, can you guys make this way more robust, because we're too busy on the back end, on the audit, on the front end. So we pretty much handed that over and said, can you guys help us with oracles? They did a full redesign in Rust. They implemented some of the ways that we make it distributed. We don't think any DApp has done so far outside of the main Oracle solutions. So we use what's called a Frost threshold signature that allows you to have a single public key on chain, which is actually using multi-party compute between multiple nodes, and that lets you get a very efficient distribution of nodes, which is to reduce the centralization in the system. That's completely source available on the Butane GitHub, and we are also working very hard to try and get a intersect working group set up for oracles that I hope is coming soon. We really want to get the Oracle problem out and looked at. So we're doing what we can to help with that.
That's brilliant. So if anyone else is interested in the Oracle side of things, try and join this working group whenever it gets up and running, and then check out the GitHub repo and everything else that's going around with the Oracle side of things. So again, thank you for your contributions there. Now you also have some Catalyst proposals. It's Catalyst season, it's Fund 11. Fund 12? Fund 12. What have you guys got in this particular fund?
So we built this SDK called Blaze, and Blaze lets you build transactions, it lets you query, it lets you do serialization and deserialization of Cardano types. It's really supposed to be a developer's wet dream. So
that's one way to describe it.
Tagline now, officially, I think.
Okay.
So our proposals are a few different upgrades, two focuses. One is to do Chang support. So all the governance upgrades in the emulator, in the SDK, we want to get that all in, which will enable you to test any products that you're building which use governance. That will be able to be done to a higher degree if that's passed through. Second one is security assurances, just make improvements to the code base. We think that's quite valuable because it's a point where you don't want to build an invalid transaction and show that to a user, because even if they look at it and they like sometimes they might miss stuff, and then if your transaction builder is throwing errors, that can be quite a pain for your business or your DApp or your solution. So we think Blaze is really meant to be a replacement for the kind of disparate SDKs we see in the ecosystem, where not all of them focus on being at the web end. Like, it doesn't always deliver to your front end in the browser. And it's not always easy to use. So we're trying to nail a few problems in a very developer-friendly way. So yeah, it's just hopefully the next big thing.
Yeah. So I think the two proposals you mentioned was the security assurances and the Chang emulator. The other two are relatively smaller.
We have 4.
Yeah, 4 in total.
2 that actually like have the max ask, but then one or two that are like small.
They're more kind of specific use cases. So one is for managing script deployments. So a lot of this comes from our experiences in building Butane. There's just a lot of tools we've kind of started internally that we think, hey, this actually was quite useful. Let's see if we can make it more polished, more refined, more usable by the community. And so one of those is how we manage our script deployments. If we publish a new version of the contracts on chain, how we can automate that in a like GitHub CD or whatever CD you use, how you can kind of keep track of that, how you can manage which scripts are already deployed, which ones need to be redeployed, stuff like that. So we're aiming to build a tool, or if that proposal passes, building some tools that really streamline that kind of process, which can, I think we think, really streamline the DevOps process. Yeah. And the other one is for making data serialization much easier. So if you're constructing datums, safe. If you're constructing datums or redeemers or any other kind of on-chain, any kind of on-chain type, it should just be much more TypeScript kind of idiomatic, much easier, safer, and
I should say also, with the way it ties into Butane, we built something called Translucent as a fork of Lucid for Butane. The entire purpose was that we wanted to make sure you could do everything on the edge in the user's browser. You could do script evaluation there, and it would have less errors, and you didn't need to run a backend service to construct the transaction for your DApps. And that's really beneficial for a lot of developer experience reasons. One thing is you don't need to host as much infrastructure, and Blaze is meant to be our new solution for this, because we figured it's easier to start from scratch, build everything to be TypeScript based, and just compile it to a very small, very easy to use package that you then load into your front end project, and
you have everything you need to build those transactions.
All in one.
Yeah. That's absolutely awesome. So just to be clear for those, just to clarify my knowledge, it's a replacement for Lucid and like Cardano serialization library.
Yes, it doesn't use CSL or CML at all. It uses Cardano JS lib, which is a library by IOHK. And the advantage is we're able to eliminate WASM more. There's still a little bit where we can eliminate that finally, so we should be able to get no WASM. And that makes it easier to put into a browser environment, just because like technical requirements, not all browsers like support it. It's sometimes you have environments like Cloudflare, for example, they don't have strong support for it in their edge compute workloads. So it really just makes it much easier to use, and it makes it more understandable as well, because developers can actually read the backend because it's in the same language they know to build the product. It has just so many improvements.
I can see a lot of value in that, huge amount of value. And I can see ourselves, like we use Emergo's Cardano serialization library still, and that WASM package file, like we have to deal with it deploying on various servers in Cardano Press. And it's difficult sometimes to try and get these projects doing it correctly. But yeah, I see a huge amount of value for that. So all the links for those proposals will be in the show notes, so that anyone that's interested can dig in and hopefully vote for you guys and support you with some of the development that you guys are doing.
Yes.
Absolutely brilliant. Guys, is there anything else that you'd like to add to this interview for our audience?
I guess we should say that the reason that we are coming to Catalyst for Blaze is we want to put money that is dedicated towards open source on hiring someone for that. So it's really like a separation of where where the money comes from that matters.
Yeah, I get that you want to have a dedicated resource building open source tools for the community. It's community funds.
Yeah.
Let's put something back for the community.
Yeah.
So it's a really good approach. Guys, thank you for sitting down and having a chat with me with everything about butane and everything else that you guys are building.
Just
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for having us on.
Awesome.